Hey, what's up everybody? Welcome to the channel. In today's video, I'm going to be going over the ins and outs of painting this RC4WD D90 body, and I've included a replica Khan wide body kit. Now today's video is going to be extra long because I'm not actually going to be showing you what I did and document it as a tutorial. I'm actually going to be showing you everything I did wrong, so you get a really clear view of everything I did, and every mistake that I made along the way I will also include, which is every single mistake you could possibly do. So choose your favorite beverage and get 2 of them, because today's video is going to be extra long. To begin with, we're going to start showing you these kits, which are the replica Khan kits. So each of these kits come with 4 pieces. That's 1 for each arch, but it's important to know that this kit isn't actually designed for this vehicle, even though I was told by the seller it was. As I lined up each arch with each corresponding panel, I realized that each of these pieces were just too long. It's too long on the front, too long on the rear, and some of the pieces weren't matching up to the areas that they should correspond to completely. This led me to believe that maybe this was for the earlier D90 bodies without the opening doors and everything. But since I had already purchased the kit, I decided to try and make this work. The front and rear of each of these pieces needs to be sanded down. You can see that the angle here is angled that way. You need to sand it so it goes that way and that it corresponds with the door panels correctly. The channels for the rivets on the D90 body do not match, as this was for the older kit, as I said. So all of the false rivets on the body need to be sanded flat. Lining up the screw holes with the body and screwing through those is nearly impossible. So what I would suggest doing is, once you have the panels lined up in the correct areas, to hold them in place with tape at the top, lift it up so it becomes a flap, use CA foam safe glue on some areas, and once it folds down, it should be in the place you set it in. Hold them together so the glue sets. Use a small drill piece for the underside of the body, coming through the body and into this here, so you can install the included screws and it holds it in place. That way it is screwed in and CA glued in. Make sure the CA glue you use is foam safe. If you are using indicators for this kit, the corresponding holes for the indicators do not match up with the body, so you are going to have to widen this enough so that the original indicators can go through this panel, and you are going to have to fashion your own holder on the rear. I just used the original rear screw mount and modified it so it worked with the indicator. On the actual body, I had to drill out a hole big enough for the entire unit to fit through with LEDs. Again, when you line up these body panels with the kit, make sure you sand the kit so that it does not foul the door mounting hardware, these hinges, and the door opens correctly here. Depending on what size tire and wheel you mount, you may have to also take off some material here just to widen this area, so that when the suspension fully bottoms out on one side, the tire and wheel has a few millimeter space so it doesn't foul the arch. As you can see, the petrol filler cap there is a lot smaller than it needs to be, and that's purposely done so that you can very carefully sand and shape this to fit the filler cap that you are using. It's almost impossible to see on camera, but the kit does have a lot of lines and some manufacturing marks on here. So you will have to sand this down very carefully. It's very difficult to see the lines, but you're going to have to go over it with an eagle eye just to make sure everything is completely flat and very uniform. Now that that's out the way, let's start talking about the painting side of this. So as you can see, the body is now semi-prepped and all the areas have been grinded out, namely the arches, and some of the body panels have been foam safe CA glued in place. I'm just checking to make sure it is all completely sanded with 600 grit sandpaper. As most of you know, this is so that the paint or the primer that you're using has something to bite into, as if you are spraying onto a smooth body, the paint could just peel off, or that's the theory anyway. So I've made sure everything is sanded to my liking. Most of the rivets have been sanded off flat here, and as you can see, the filler cap area has been grinded out, and this is so that when you install the filler cap, it has enough room to slide inside, as it's not being held in place by the original body anymore. It's actually going to be installed onto the new wide arch panel. So this is the color that I ended up with. This is actually the color, but the color you're seeing here is a 2K color, which I've put on as base coat, and it has a 2K gloss coat on top as well. Now don't worry that you didn't see me spraying this, because there's going to be a lot more about spray painting. I'm going to actually do a lot more painting in a minute. There's a small drip there, as you can see on the rear panel there, but that's going to be taken care of when I grind that off, or when I sand that down, sorry. Now if you saw the roof just then, you saw that it was a dark grey. That's the actual colour of the plastic, and this is the final colour that I'm going for. You could probably tell here that I've started buffing, started sanding to try and get a really uniform finish on here. This is quite a few hours work in as well, after spraying and all the buffing and everything. We're talking about many hours of work here, so this is just the start. I'm trying to get it really shiny and bring up this almost like a glass oily look for this. So as you can see, I'm taking off any uneven spots, and the orange peel that originally was on it, I'm trying to get rid of that now. So as you can see, the door panel here, it is quite uniform and the color is exactly what I'm going for. What I want you to see though is the orange peel. This is in its original form without touching, so this is what it looks like after hard drying. And this is it's a bonnet, but this is basically a piece that I have been buffing for quite a while, just to give you a feel for the difference. And as you can see, it is starting to look a lot better now. Now from a distance, or from this distance, you can see everything is looking very uniform, very nice. In fact, I'm super happy with how everything is going so far. But there are some areas which are kind of not so pretty, if you know what I mean, and I'm going to show you in a second what I mean. Now on one of the panels, if you look very closely, you can see almost bubbling or pitting, and this is under high magnification. You can see it's almost like popped bubbles under the paintwork, and no amount of sanding or buffing could get that out, which I wasn't too happy about. But it's a very important step for me, because it's a learning curve, and because this has happened, I can investigate why it happened in order to find out what I can do to prevent it in the future. Now if you look really closely here, this is the panel that has been resprayed now, but this is where all that problem was, and according to some experts or some painters, the reason I had that bubbling or those pinpricks in the paint was because I didn't clean the body enough. I was advised that whatever I used to clean it, maybe afterwards I left some of the cleaning agent on here and didn't wash it away enough, or I had some grease on my hands and I reintroduced some oils to the body. So that's a tip if you're thinking about painting your body. You have to clean these immaculately, as in they have to be completely free from any cleaning agents, any chemicals and any oils, and if your hands, bare skin, touches any part, you have to clean that again. So it's best to wear brand new gloves whenever you touch your body prior to painting. But that was the least of my worries, because as you can see here, the paint started to peel off in clean chunks. Now it was a really tough paint. It was 2K paint. It was applied correctly apparently, and everything was going smoothly. I have been advised by a painter that quite possibly the paint I used was too hot, so to say, for the thing that I'm painting. Meaning, even though I sanded all these sand marks in there for the paint to bite into, because the paint was so, shall we say, aggressive, what it did was it melted the top layer of the shell and made it smooth again, thus making the paint just lay on top. So what I did next was I stripped down all the paint of the areas that were loose and that could be picked off. All the other areas that was solid mounted I just left. And after a few hours of sanding, I decided to repaint the thing. This time I was going for an off-the-shelf aerosol can spray, and what I was doing was respraying the whole thing in a matte, almost graphite type paint. This was the first coat, and this is after 3 coats and it being fully dried. It's a matte paint now. At that point I was just a bit tired of so much painting and so many hours work going down the drain, but I didn't give up and I decided to go for this color here. And this is the final result of that point. This isn't the final paint I used, but at that point this was the final result. And as you can see, it's quite uniform, very nice matte finish here, and it felt very very gravelly. It was a very rough paint, which I really enjoyed at that point. Little did I know that I was going to have an even bigger problem after this paint had dried. As you can see here, everything's been sanded so the rear door panel fits nicely, no catching, and it won't scrape the paint off, although it did at some point. And then I'll reveal to you what happened next. And then what happened next was that the paint started to peel again, only this time it wasn't the new paint, it was all of the old paint that I had thought was securely painted on. So all of the paint that I couldn't remove before was now starting to peel. So after going back to the drawing board, there was really only one true solution I could do, which was to completely strip down the body again, this time completely, 100% of all of the paint. And that was a mix of sanding, scraping, and chemical removal, basically. So it was a very difficult time for me, because after spending so many hours on something, you kind of get burnt out. And that is exactly what the point I was at. I just couldn't do any more, and I thought, but I didn't give up. And I decided, after sulking for a little bit, I decided, okay, this is a good learning curve. I'm learning a lot from doing this, and you can only learn more by doing more. So from then on, I started to strip the paint down, which was more work than I've ever done before. If there's anything harder than painting, it is removing the paint so that you have a fresh canvas, so to say, to start off again. And that's exactly where I started from. And this time I decided to use off-the-shelf aerosol spray cans for paint. I wasn't going to spend the same amount of money on any 2K paints anymore, basically because I'm probably not at a level where I can use them or utilize them correctly. So I decided to use, as I said, off-the-shelf spray. I chose a color that I wanted, which is an Audi color, the actual car manufacturer Audi. It's a kind of metallic gray, but you'll see that in a minute. So right now what you're looking at is the first few coats of a primer, and I believe it was a plastic primer I was using, which was just off the shelf for very cheap. I bought at a hardware store, because I wanted to see how it would adhere to this type of body. And one thing I noticed was the 2K paint wasn't peeling off the Khan wide body parts. They were adhered to that quite well, even though I sanded it off from there as much as I could. It was mainly the RC4WD drive hard body that it was peeling off of. And this is the bonnet here with the final coat of primer, and I'm about to show you what the body color looks like. Now I chose this body color because it was very difficult for me to pick a color. I mean, if I sat down and tried to choose a color, I really couldn't pick one. So in the end I went with this metallic paint, basically because it looks very different in different lights. As you can see here, in a dull light it kind of just looks gray, but in under a spotlight or sunshine it almost looks glittery with a lot of sparkle in it, and it lightens up the color a lot. And I really enjoyed that. I loved having different tones in different lights. So this is the bonnet fully done with the gloss coat here, slightly polished, slightly buffed and everything to try and get the shine out. But as you can see, I'm really happy with the result there, especially being my first time working with paints like this. I'm quite happy with this result. And this is the body fully painted and glossed. I used a gloss top coat, and as you can see, it is not been buffed yet. Now I haven't buffed it yet because I wanted to show you what the orange peel looked like on this body with this type of paint, and I also wanted to show you the rear here. On the truck bed I've used what looks like a truck bed coating, well, to simulate it. It's not actual truck bed coating, but it was that very matte rough grain paint that I was talking about that I found in the hardware store. It is a non-aggressive paint, so on it kind of looks like a truck bed, and that's what I used. And this now, what you're seeing is the body almost completely finished and sanded over and buffed. Now if you're wondering what I used to buff it to try and bring the shine out, what I used was just a Dremel and a mini buffing wheel, and I used a polishing compound on that, like you would use for normal cars. It was a mix of using different grade sandpapers, finishing with 3000 grit, I believe it was, and also using that buffing wheel. And the next thing I had to paint was the headlight housing bulb reflectors. For that I used some of this chrome or gilding solution, which was really reflective. In fact, after using it, it almost resembled a mirror, and as you can see, it really brings out the headlight. It gives it kind of this 3D in-depth dimension look, so I enjoyed that very much. I did try using normal paint once, but it didn't really come out right, but as you can see here, it's really reflecting the light and kind of brings the light more lifelike, if that makes sense. And that's basically it, guys. That's my video sharing with you what happened when I was painting this model kit and this RC4WD D90 body, the 2015 variant I should have mentioned. But I hope some of the mistakes that I made during painting this would help other hobbyists out there, because I know a lot of people are getting into the hobby. Just like me, they're beginners, and some of you guys haven't painted anything yet. So maybe by sharing my mistakes, you probably get a feel of what could go wrong and what can help the process go more smoothly. So right now I'm just going to try and share as many tips as I can with what I can remember while doing this kit, and hopefully it's going to help you. Temperature is very, very important when spraying this. This bonnet lid is actually the second bonnet lid I've done. The first one was spray painted and a few mistakes went wrong. I shared with you half of the problems, but I'm going to share with you exactly what went wrong with my first bonnet. Now, aside from the paint stripping off it and peeling off very easily, when I was using this paint, I was spray painting at night when it was misty and cold outside. So the temperature of the area I was spraying in at night was very close to freezing. Not quite, but it was very close. And what that did to the paint was it made the gloss coat go very hazy. It looked just like it was quite foggy. After some research, I found out that you can actually remove the fog with a heat gun. So that's exactly what I did. For a very long time I put a heat gun to it, not this one but the first bonnet, and it did take the haze out and make it into a really nice gloss coat. But the problem is, because the heat gun was so close to this area here, the bonnet started to warp, and that was something I couldn't live with. At that point I got a new bonnet ordered in, and then I started to spray this in a heated workshop on a night that wasn't misty or raining. And that really helped. Temperature is very, very important. The moist level, the humidity, and temperature is very, very important when spraying stuff. Now, there's quite a few pieces that are black and are this type of plastic. The way they come is quite shiny, okay, in standard form. That includes this black rim here and some of the other fixings around as well. So what I did was I bought a paint from the hardware store just off the shelf, and I was advised that that type of paint, the black paint here that you see, is an etching type of paint. Now, they explained it as it will not peel, basically, because what the paint does is it doesn't settle on and bite into the sanding marks that you make. What it actually does is it gouges or etches itself into the plastic. The shop explained to me that what it does is it modifies the plastic and actually becomes part of it. It kind of melts into it. That's what they said anyway. They didn't want to get into too much detail, as long as I understood that this type of paint couldn't be scratched off very easily. It's almost embedded onto the plastic, which I thought was fantastic, because being on the front here, if I bang into anything, it's going to hold up slightly better than just the normal paint. Another thing which I'd like to show on the rear here is the lights. I've installed two work lights here, and the wire that goes to them comes from the back onto that pillar on the inside and runs along the pillar all the way down to the inside of the body, and that's how I've hidden it there. So these no longer are movable, but everything's well hidden and they're fully working, which I really enjoy. This line here, which separates the false truck bed coating which I put on here, it was just a tape. I put some painter's tape along here to kind of mask it off and just sprayed over it, and that's how that's on there and how I got that straight line there. The truck bed here has that non-slip plate. I would say It's quite a nice install if you're going for that look, and it gives it that kind of realistic, rugged look, which I really enjoy. But if you are going for a truck bed coating look like I have here, I wouldn't say these are necessary. But for me, it was kind of a look I really wanted to go for on this. The truck bed coating comes along this line here and follows this line along here. There are some plugs which are installed here in here, and what I did was just sand them in to kind of get rid of that seam line a little bit so they blend in a little bit more. Of course, the back of the cabin here is installed like this, so there will be a very light seam line here. I tried using sanding and some putty to remove that, but I could only do so much with my own skill set, so you'll probably have better luck at hiding that. I'm not too bothered about it. It is quite well hidden, but it is there if you're looking for it. This is a seam line which I tried hiding. As you know, the back of this cabin part here slots on top before the roof goes on top. So as you can see, there will be a seam line there. All I did was use some foam safe CA glue in there, and then I tried, there it is, you can see there, sanding it and try and blending it in as best as possible so that it's not too prominent. Also, one thing I did notice was when you go online, a lot of people say sometimes this magnet here, you could just sort of see it there, that magnet there, sometimes falls out. And what I noticed on the kit that you can buy, this is the kit, when you make it, they advise you that you glue those magnet parts in. I used a CA glue and it held in there really well. But one thing I did notice about this is if you buy the ready to run model, which I have over here, I'll just show you, the magnets on the ready to run models aren't glued in. They have a drilled hole through them inside. They actually have a hole inside, and they are screwed into a mounting screw hole here. So that's why I guess the magnets on the ready to run models never fall off. It's because they're actually physically screwed in, which is pretty handy. And if you're wondering, yes, I did repaint my ready to run model after installing another one of these replica Khan wide arch body kits. I may do a video on this one later, but I'm not too sure because you have seen quite a lot of this vehicle already. One thing I really like about this kit is it comes with these side vents here which you can paint in your own color, and there is a Khan emblem there which I think is pretty neat. The interior I just painted in a very standard paint. It was two different types of paint which I had left over, so I just spray painted them hastily one afternoon. I've again installed some lights after I've drilled out the dash unit there so that all of the dash lights up. So you kind of have a speed gauge, fuel gauge, and an RPM gauge. I also chromed the tops of the gear sticks, if you can see there, just to give it a bit more of a bling look. This is going to have a new bumper on the rear, which I've purchased, but it's in the mail to me at the moment, so that's not installed yet. The number plate light I've installed in there, and it does light up, which I really enjoy on most of my builds. Don't worry about these foam pieces, these are just for when I'm putting the vehicle away on the stand. They're just there to kind of stabilize it. And the roof is just a black gloss. So that's it, guys. That was my video showing you my first attempt at painting one of these models. I really hope the information in this video helps someone out there, helps some beginners get into the hobby, or if you're about to paint yours, learn from my mistakes and be a bit more careful with the paint you choose and whether it's compatible with the actual body. The RC four-wheel drive bodies, in my experience, are quite soft and very, very susceptible from chemical damage, and really do not like aggressive paints. They're also quite soft to the touch, so you're going to be really careful when you're working on them and spraying them, basically. Okay, so I can't really get proper camera angle in there, but that's the fuel filler cap, as you can see. I hope you enjoyed this video. I sure enjoyed working on these and painting them and building them, and I'm just so excited to share with you guys what I've done. So hopefully the video is a bit long, but hopefully you enjoyed it and maybe you learned something new. Thanks for watching. See ya.